Okay, everybody, here's a few quick items for you. The governors of Ohio and Kentucky are beginning to roll out their reopening plans. Kentucky is initially focused on healthcare providers starting to reopen. So things like hospital outpatient settings, healthcare clinics, medical offices, physical therapy, chiropractic offices, and optometrists. Also dental offices, but with enhanced aerosol protections. These are all on the table and have started opening this week, April 27th. The next phase isn't slated until May 11, and really we're waiting to see what that will be. We are pretty sure that things like bars, restaurants, salons, daycares are not part of this next phase yet. In Ohio, we know offices, manufacturing, and elements tied to the construction industry that were not deemed essential and therefore shut down can resume starting May 4th. Limited retail and customer-facing businesses can resume on May 12th, but like Kentucky, things like bars, dine-in restaurants, salons, daycares do not have a firm reopen date yet. So really, what does this mean for us? Well, we've created a transition plan to reflect these anticipated changes. But before that, we want to reiterate how OSHA defines the exposure risk on the job sites. Remember, according to OSHA guidelines, guidance on preparing workplace for COVID-19, work areas have been classified into 4 categories based on the level of risk. You may recall they are as follows. The lower exposure risk jobs are those that do not require contact with people known to be or suspected of being infected with COVID-19 or frequent close contact with the public within 6 feet. Workers in this category have minimal occupational contact with the public or other coworkers. Now, the medium exposure risk jobs include things that require frequent or possible close contact, again within 6 feet, of people who may be infected with COVID-19 but are not known or suspected COVID-19 patients. In areas where there's ongoing community transmission, workers in this category may have contact with the general public. So again, places like schools, high population density work environments like the Krogers, some high volume retail settings. The high exposure risk jobs are those with high potential for exposure to known or suspected sources of COVID-19, and very high exposure risk jobs are those with high potential for exposure known or suspected sources of COVID-19. Again, this is more your medical facilities, post-mortem, laboratory procedures, emergency rooms, ICUs, those types of places where it's known to exist. Okay, so we've covered the 4 risk scenarios as outlined by OSHA, and our protocols revolved around that. Now what we want to cover is, there's been a lot of talk about protective face coverings, when to wear them, when not to wear them, what's the process in those policies. So we want to clarify some of that. With us today is our CEO, Jeff Kennedy. Jeff, you're on.
Thanks for having me, Sean.
And I'm glad you could make the time. There's a lot of information out there. Some of it's conflicting. Some of it is literally changing on the hour. We've seen it happen in press conferences and news releases. What's our policy going to be going forward to the best of our ability with wearing protective coverings on the job sites?
Well, Sean, I have to smile a little bit about that particular question because we've been, as you well know, we've been watching 2 governors, the governor in Ohio and Kentucky, and both of them with good intent, doing a pretty good job and trying to do the best they can. But they're beginning to unknowingly and step across the line into what traditionally has been controlled by OSHA. And I don't know that they're doing it knowingly, but they are kind of stepping across the line. And because they're stepping across that line and not dealing with OSHA related issues, they are kind of muddying the water a little bit. And that's caught some of us in the industry by surprise. And a lot of us are trying to work through that and try to find what should be the correct procedures. And so we've been on the phone with Associated Builders and Contractors. We've been on the phone with Northern Kentucky Chamber, looking at some supply chain issues and trying to determine what the best methods should be. And I think we have a pretty good idea, at least where Ion Apex is going to go. I'd be more than glad to share that with you today.
Okay. Walk us down that path, what you see, at least for us, for now.
Well, I don't think it's going to change very much, but
Right.
I do have to say that as always, and in keeping, and we're going to keep some pretty standard policies. And I have to remind everybody that those policies have always been there and they will continue to be there. You know, using face covering and face mask is not new to us. We use it for asbestos and lead paint. We use it when we're in a hazardous environment where toxic gases are present. So, you know, this is not new to us in the construction trade. It may be new to a company that's specializes in retail and dealing with the general public and so forth. But in construction, we've dealt with face masks in the past, and I think we got a better handle on it than most. So some of the things to remember that has always been there is that each and every individual always has a stop work authority, and that is at any given time that they believe that they are dealing with a risk or a safety issue that they need to deal with, they can stop work immediately. It's called the stop work authority, and let's remember that that's always in play. So if one of our members at Ion Apex Electric, one of our employees, they believe that they're at any given risk, they have the right to and basically the responsibility to stop work and back out and deal with it. So let's remember that that's still in play. The second thing is that when you went through your different levels of risk, the low risk, medium risk, high risk, and very high risk, one of the things that separated the medium risk from the low risk is the general public, the presence of the general public. And OSHA has always recommended and tried and recommended and said, hey, look, get the general public out of your construction work.
Right.
It makes no sense with your standing there with safety glasses on, a hard hat, and steel-toed shoes that a 87-year-old grandmother with a grocery cart should be standing in your workspace. And if she's standing in your workspace, she probably got through some barriers someplace, and you better go fix those barriers, get her off the job site and get those barriers fixed. So it's, you know, first and foremost, make sure the general public isn't in your space. Okay. So those have always been two rules it's always been there, and I think they still apply very much today, and we need to be reminded that they are. So the first thing is get the general public out of the space, put barriers up, and make sure you're separated from the general public. That's going to take a lot of the risk out of the equation in regards to COVID-19. Then the question becomes okay, what about the low risk environment, which we should be working in? Again, we've got the general public off the job site. What requirements can we and what safeguards can we put in place there in order to keep COVID-19 off our job site? And that is we need to be taking temperatures 2 times a day. And we need to be diligent about it. If you're sick, don't come into work. Okay. If you're running a fever, don't come into work. Yeah. And we need to be looking at the temperatures 2 times a day, once in the morning and one later in the afternoon, and making sure that nobody is coming up with a fever, and we need to remove those people off the job site if they are. Okay. So now we have, with that restraint in place, we're beginning to take control of our environment. Okay. A little bit more. No public, nobody on the job site with a fever. Now, this is where the real question comes in, and whether or not we're contradicting what the governors are saying. And the governors are saying, if you come out of your house and go out into the public, you got to wear a face mask.
Or they highly recommend.
Yeah, and then they got it under mandatory, and then they give you a list of exceptions and reasons not to. And it's changed. You and I both have watched on the Ohio website that has changed 3 times, I think, over the last 2 days of their positioning on that. And I know we have individuals trying to get clarity, working with the governors, trying to get clarity. And it's a big problem. I'm not saying it's not. You're trying to bring back everybody from law offices to retail space to construction to manufacturers to barbers to single sole owner barbers to large manufacturing facilities with thousands of people. And so, unfortunately, you can't do a one rule applies to all in those given situations. So that's always going to give us some problems. But let's go back to that work area where the general public's not involved, and we're taking temperature and what OSHA has defined as being a low risk exposure.
So that low risk exposure category, where most of our guys optimally are going to be, what's going to be our policies going forward?
Right. And here's what the governors are telling us as owners, that we may need to tell our employees or insist or mandate to our employees that they have a face mask. Oh no, not a rated face mask, but just a bandana and 2 rubber bands. No, not even like that. They even showed, if you remember, they even showed
the video where they were folding
a bandana up and putting 2 rubber bands on it. And she was recommending, well, get a well-used rubber band so it don't pull on your ears. Guys, that's kind of like, if you want to know the truth about it, that's kind of like nailing 2x4s together and calling it a ladder. And then when OSHA shows up and OSHA goes, what is that? And you go, that's a ladder. And they go, that's not a ladder. And you go, yeah, it's a ladder. It's not rated. It's not, well, it's, and then us looking at OSHA and say, well, that's better than nothing. Well, and I have never, and since I've been in this career since 1977, I've never seen what OSHA would accept. Well, it's better than nothing as a, and accept that as being applicable to a job site.
Sure, their standards are going to be a little bit higher.
Or it's right, and so most, and if not all of the equipment that we use has been tested and rated for the application in which it's being used. And a bandana and 2 rubber bands doesn't necessarily fit that in the workspace. Now, I'm not going to argue with the governor. If the governor wants you all to wear rubber bands and bandanas and wants me to wear, I'll get a bandana and 2 rubber bands and wear it to programs. Don't have a problem with that. Just as being an owner of a construction firm, I cannot allow anybody to believe that even comes close to PPE.
Right. It does probably convey a false sense of security.
And so what do we do with that? Well, first off, I do believe that we put parameters again in this low risk environment by taking the temperatures and controlling the people that's in the workspace. We have some control parameters in place.
Right. We've created a closed environment.
Yes, yes. And so from that standpoint, I believe that face coverings, particularly the type of face coverings that they're talking about, a bandana and 2 rubber bands, is not required in that space. And I'm going to go another level and say, with that same premise, that if we are working in an environment where we are coming in contact with the general public, then I'm also going to say that a bandana and 2 rubber bands isn't applicable either.
Sure, because that becomes a medium right at that point. Once you introduce the uncontrolled general public, that moves it up a class right out of the gate as far as the COVID concern.
That's right. And I'm not going to trust and put my people in that environment and not give them a KN95 or an N95 mask. Yes. Now I probably won't say that on it. Okay.
NIOSH N95.
but
oh yeah, my own special edition. It's okay, guys, if you want to flare them up a little bit.
But I'm not going to suggest to our employees that, well, you're okay with working with the general public in a bandana and 2 used rubber bands.
Right.
Okay. Now the argument has been, well, don't use the KN95s or the N95s. The hospitals need those. And I understand the concerns, and I understand flattening the curve, and I understand getting to the point of where the medical community has the mask and so forth that they need. That is one of the things that we worked very, very hard through on social distancing, is to make sure that we got those resources in place. but I'm being told by reliable sources that face masks can be ordered and can be obtained without causing a strain upon the healthcare facilities.
Right. That the supply chain lines, it's become documented. They're catching up. That needs being filled. And now it's okay to let these kind of back out to the contractors and people that use them all the time anyway. If you're dealing with particulates or silica, or if you're drilling, we use these anyhow.
Right. We use them and we need them if we're going to be working.
Right.
You know, we're not going to turn back around and go, okay, well, we're going to deal with asbestos, and because we're dealing with asbestos and they want us to work, we're going to go ahead and work. No, we're going to have the proper mask on to deal with asbestos or lead or silica or whatever that is required for the situation we're dealing with.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm saying that when you're dealing with the public, and I'm not going to impose my thoughts and policies upon other companies. I'm just saying that when Ion Apex employees are working directly with the general public, they need to have the proper mask on, which I believe to be a KN95 or an N95.
Right.
Now, those that's handling our supply chain is telling us that we can get within 4 weeks, we can get the ample number of masks that's required in order to do that. And again, we're doing it without diminishing the supply needed by the medical community. But remember this, you know, instead of using a mask, get the general public out of your construction space and you don't have to worry about a mask.
Right.
Okay.
So what are we going to do internally for the guys that are, we know, like on a closed environment, projects are currently going on in Ingalls, Fairborn, and they're going about their daily tasks. What should they do for face coverings? And we also discussed, what if there's a team meeting? What if there's a job site meeting? What are going to be the protocols there?
Yeah. And so now we're just looking at now in that controlled environment. Again, it's a low risk environment. The individuals decide to congregate in 10 or more workers, cluster or congregate. And that would be, as you suggested, it would be, let's say they decided that they were going to do a project management meeting or a pool plan or an update to the Gantt chart, and they wanted a representation of all of the different trades that was on a job site. They're going to meet in the office trailer, which is sometimes confined itself, and there's more than 10 people that's going to meet. For us, Ion Apex, if you're going to be in that setting, more than 10 individuals, put on a KN95 or a N95 mask. Or let me make another suggestion. Break that meeting up and do it in 2 settings and have less people in the meeting. Do it in stages, okay? Or maybe limit the number of representation that you have from each of your trades that's in the meeting. All right, there are different ways, but it seems like the 10 or less seems to be accepted. That is something that the government has said for funerals, for any type of congregations and so forth. They're looking at that as being a smaller group. And so we're adapting that policy also in regards to what we're doing, which is 10 workers or less. If you go above 10 workers, you put a mask on. But again, that's one of those things is first try not to meet in groups of 10 or more.
Right.
But if you have to, put a mask on.
Put a mask on. So that's going to be a policy of ours. Another issue that has come up was, you know, people have families. People have people in their houses. They may have loved ones that might have health conditions at home. What if somebody would just feel more comfortable if folks were around? Hey, can we work together? Can we cover up? That's something that we've discussed, and I think this is a really good thing for everybody to hear about.
Sure, and this is, you know, this is something we're calling a personal safety request, and we're going to honor those requests as team members and so forth. And let me give you a couple of examples of what that might be. You might have an individual who has an 87-year-old mother-in-law that's living with them. She's in ill health, and they've been very concerned about taking COVID-19 home to that particular individual, or maybe even a child who has an immune deficiency. And it's a special need, a special case. And so let's assume that that individual's name is Frank, and Frank is working with John and Peter, and Frank looks at John and Peter and tells them about the child and says, do you all mind, as we're working together as a smaller group, as we're working together, if you all would put on face covering? And by all means, we need to honor those requests for that particular individual out of respect to alleviate and help alleviate the fear, or help that particular individual deal with their given situation. We need to come together as a team and honor those personal requests. And so the question becomes then is, well, what if that request isn't honored? Call me. We'll talk about it.
And that covers that.
Right. But it's we need to come together as a team. We always need to come together. When we do a good job, our people have been supportive all through this. We've worked with each other and so forth. And I have no doubt that will take place. But let's assume for some reason, whatever reason, that doesn't happen. Again, remember that the individual who made the request, if they do not believe that the area, the safety environment in which they're working, the environment which they're working in, isn't providing them the level of safety in which they would need in order to feel comfortable, then they exit that and they call HR, they call me, or they call Mike Dudley, and report that, and then we're gonna investigate that and figure out how we can get solutions in place in order to move forward. Okay, so that is, you see, one of the things that's being kicked around and talking about is the 6-foot rule, Sean.
Mm-hmm.
And then you get down to the 6-foot rule of, well, don't come within 6 foot of individuals, and you see the markings on the floor to retail spaces and so forth and so on. And we do need to do everything we can to get separation on our job sites. We need to work from a coordination. Our scheduler, Brandon Hostler, is working with the contractors in order to get trade stacking out of the equation and so forth. And so, yeah, it makes sense. The solution might be as well, you go over and work on that switch gear over there, and we'll work on this, right? But there's going to be times when you need help, or you need a hand to get the conduit up, or
sure,
you're going to come in contact. And the question is going to be is, well, how much contact? How often are you within 6 feet, right? And so forth. And that's a dance that we're not going to be able to run around on the job site with the tape measure and always insisting on it. And I'm going to have to require those small work groups. I'm not going to say just work it out on your own. That's not what we're saying. But that's a dance that that work group is going to have to do without getting figurative on each other's toes, so to speak. And they're going to have to come up with a good working solution that each and every member of that work group feels comfortable with. And again, if one of them don't feel comfortable with it, you have the authority to stop work, back up, okay, and then come up with a game plan that's going to work. And our guys have been good. Our people have been good about doing that.
Yeah, I mean, it is a total team effort, top to bottom,
right,
that people have put into this and to keep us moving forward. You highlighted earlier today in one of our conversations, we wanted to share with that. Kind of highlight those next 6 or 7 steps that you wanted to highlight in our conversation today for us going forward.
Yeah, all this conversation, we shake it all out, right? We have all this conversation, and yes, and it's changing very rapidly. And Sean, I won't be surprised if as common sense begins to work through the filter, or all this conversation starts working through the filter of common sense, I should say, that we're not going to get some different approaches and policies that shake out at the bottom. And let me also, before I go through these 6 things, let me also say that, again, one of the policies that we have is at any given time, if any general contractor, any owner, all right, any plant that we're working in, again, the policies I'm about to state here may be superseded by the policies of that given plant, by that general contractor or that particular job site. So don't say, well, we're doing it this way. No, if you remember, we got some lift issues. A typical lift issue is whether or not to wear a safety harness or not. Some plants require it, some don't. We require it on some occasions, and we don't require it on other occasions. So you've got to know the rules and regulations as it applies to the particular plant or general contractor that you're working with.
And we'll make sure to convey those, obviously, to the project managers, get those out to you so there's no confusion.
Right.
And be able to go forward and keep projects moving forward.
So right now,
I like those bullet points for us.
So right now our policy is take and record temperatures on every project within the company at least 2 times a day. Okay, that's the warehouse, the school, the apprenticeship training center. That's the general office, the corporate office, and on the job site. Take your temperature, get your temperatures, use the strips, get the recordings at least 2 times a day. Number 2 is keep the general public off the job site. OSHA encourages this, recommends it. There's no reason for the general public to be on a construction job site. All right. Don't cluster and congregate in groups of more than 10 individuals. And if you do, put a mask on. And if you're going to put a mask on, have it be a rated protective mask. Okay. All right. When working with the general public, if you do have to work with the general public, put a rated protective mask on. All right. Within work groups, smaller than 10, honor, you all work it out, and we should and will honor personal safety requests made by any member of that work group. And this may include face coverings. And it may be totally acceptable by that particular individual to accept bandanas and rubber bands in keeping with what the government is requiring and so forth. And
Sure.
if everybody's comfortable with that and you guys are working enough within the 6-foot area that you believe that some additional measures should be taken, let's discuss it and take it. Right. And
communication is going to be key.
Yeah. But so work that out amongst your groups, and then remember that all individuals, everybody within the company, has the work stop authority, and that means that if they're uncomfortable with the given environment or setting that they have, they can back out of that situation. All right. Take the time, take a breath. Okay. Call HR, talk to your project manager, talk to your foreman, talk to the safety director, whoever we need to get involved in order to reset and then go back to work, solve whatever concerns and deal with whatever concerns that individual has, and then hopefully go back to work to be able to do it, to move forward.
Great tips going forward. Jeff, we want to thank you for your time today, and want to tell everybody we're going to keep you as updated as we can. If we need to pull you back in, Jeff, we know you make yourself available.
Sean, thank you. Let me also say that as you go forward and talk about some of the reopenings, the school and so forth and so on, that we're trying to keep these policies consistent across those venues. For instance, at school, we're trying to, we will be narrowing those classroom sizes to no more than 10 individuals.
You're taking my segue away.
I will, but what I'm trying to point out as you get into that you will see consistency. What we're trying to do is be consistent across, look at this logically with common sense and provide consistency throughout everything that we're doing. And Sean, thanks for everything you do.
Thank you, Jeff, and thank you guys, and we'll be right back.
Thank you.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of material so far, which included the use of the masks and also some of the things we're seeing happening with the economy in Ohio, Kentucky, how that's going to impact us, we're going to be able to work, what it's going to mean for us going forward. So let's go over our current policies and target dates. Temperature readings and recordings will remain in place till at least June 30th. Operations and Safety will appoint a safety subcommittee to make recommendations for best practices associated with job site sanitation. The objective is to refine these recommendations into long-term standard procedures. Cleaning supplies will continue being issued to the job sites. HR and accounting will allow vacation pay to be used in the same manner as personal days until May 16th. It will end on this date. Standard attendance policies will resume on May 16th. Except for those circumstances where the individual is not allowed to work due to a high temperature. This will require a medical release before an individual can return to work. This will continue until at least August 4th. When schools close for the summer, not for COVID-19, and the governors allow daycare providers to reopen, then HR 6102 for daycare no longer applies. The timing of these two qualifiers will vary from state to state and school district to school district. Remember, this is part of the Family Medical Leave Act. Those that are participating in the program need to understand the mechanics in order to make alternative arrangements for childcare. The 80 additional hours of personal paid time available for the treatment or care of COVID-19 does remain in place, though, until the end of this year. The apprenticeship program will resume on the first Monday following two full weeks after the Ohio and Kentucky stay-at-home orders are ended. For example, if both governors end the stay-at-home orders on May 1st, then the apprenticeship program will restart on Monday, May 18th. Temperatures will be taken at the start of each class until further notice. The thermometers work for the job sites, but we are going to use a no-touch electronic thermometer for the apprenticeship program. Online training will be used when applicable and effective. Classes on person will be limited to 10 individuals total, including the instructors, until further notice. Texting will resume as previously implemented. Compliance formulas will be adjusted, though, to account for the time off during the COVID-19 pandemic. The no passenger policy for company vehicles does continue until May 31st of this year. A lot of information. We encourage you, take your time, watch these videos, check your emails. If you have any questions, always feel free to reach out to me or anybody. You can catch me directly, scox@inapex.com. Thanks again for your time and your attention.